We are nearing the end of the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. Referees are holding back South Carolina coach Shane Beamer. Illinois' head coach is jawing from across the field at him. He seems to be T-posing at Shane Beamer while checking on his player. What is going on? What happened and how did we get here? Well, to understand the saltiest, pettiest bowl game I've ever seen, we are going to have to do what we do so well.
What we do here is go back.
And to begin, let's take a look at South Carolina's head coach, Shane Beamer, because there was a lot of frustration building into this game. South Carolina opened their season by barely beating Old Dominion as this CUSA team went into an SEC team's home opener and made the Gamecocks offense look completely flaccid, as they even held the lead at one point in the fourth quarter, and if it wasn't for a fluke fumble at the 4-yard line, giving the ball back to the Gamecocks in striking distance to just squeeze out the win before going to Kentucky and having a smooth sailing 31-6 victory. It was after this game, though, that we would start to see the theme of this video, and that was South Carolina getting screwed. Now, this game was filled with ref ball, regardless, with there being 22 penalties in a 60-minute affair. But holy hell was South Carolina the ones getting screwed the most. They opened up by jumping out to a 17-0 lead thanks to a blocked punt, some good defense, before slowly but surely that lead would start to be chipped away. LSU put together a big drive, forced a fumble, and kicked a field goal to suddenly be within one score. And after more scores by LSU and South Carolina, in the final drive of the half, their star quarterback Sellers goes down with an ankle injury just to make the second half that much harder to navigate for the Gamecocks. But that second half, oh man, that second half. 3rd and 10 throwing into the end zone. Pass interference. They hold off with a big goal line stand, but their offense was hamstringed now and had to punt, giving the Tigers great field position, which was quickly turned into a score. 2 minutes and 22 seconds left, 2nd and 4. Pass interference number 2, and suddenly LSU had the first lead of the day. That wouldn't last long as South Carolina found a huge crease for a 66-yard gain, where even on that big score, the 2-point conversion was broken up by an offensive lineman, allegedly going too far downfield, drawing another penalty, even though when we look at the freeze frame, you don't really see it, to get that attempt called back, and then the second attempt was no good. Things looked like they were going great and were about to even get better when, on a drive that was set way back by an offensive pass interference call against South Carolina, they get strip sacked in easy scoring range. But as LSU was attempting to score, they get a pick 6 to set them up 2 scores ahead, but there was a flag on that play for an alleged unnecessary roughness, despite the fact that it was a relatively tame hit to keep them from being up 11 points and putting them back at the 10-yard line where their offense was already struggling. So they're forced to punt. LSU gets the ball and scores to go up 3, and even after all of this, South Carolina gets into field goal range to tie it up, and the kick is missed. Now, I'm not saying the calls were all wrong, but it is without a doubt an extremely frustrating ways to lose, and even the announcers ended the game saying something along the lines of it being a very controversial game with refs playing a huge role. But they got to take their frustration out on Akron before getting another frustrating game against Ole Miss that had turnovers, 4th down failed conversions, a missed field goal, and the general vibe that despite a lopsided 27-3 score, they felt like they should have been able to compete in that game a bit more, but had their biggest test of the season coming up with Alabama coming to them. And oh man, if you are an Alabama fan, this game took a minimum of 3 years off your life, and if you're a South Carolina fan, it took 12. I mean, you had safeties, Alabama giving the ball back to the Gamecocks with a second left in the half to get them a field goal where they took the lead, then fumbled it away on a fake handoff of all things to give Bama the ball in scoring range, then drove and missed a go-ahead field goal before Alabama scored with less than 2 minutes left, made it seem like the game was over, but South Carolina brought it within 2, and my God, they got the onside kickback with 40 seconds, and then what the hell was that play? Regardless of if you were sitting on your couch and didn't move a muscle, you burned more calories than if you went and ran a mile, regardless of which side you were on, with South Carolina now sitting at a depressing 3-3. But they would then go on an absolute tear, not losing another game and going into Death Valley to take on Clemson, who was seen to be one of the better teams in the country, and playing their heart out to win by 3, while banging the drum alongside Ole Miss and Alabama that one of these 3 teams should be the 5th SEC team to make it to the playoffs, with South Carolina arguably having the best case, only losing to strong teams with their loss to LSU having a big gaping asterisk beside it. But the committee decided against it, with Clemson making it in over the team that just beat them at home, and South Carolina was now off to face Illinois, who was in a different but strikingly similar position. Yes, they were also 9-3, but 2 of those losses also came from 2 playoff teams, opposed to 2 slightly above the pack middle SEC teams, with them having one more embarrassing loss to the Golden Gophers, with their last 2 drives ending with turnover on downs and a fumble in the red zone, just 8 points away from tying it up. But that's the Big Ten though, getting less babying by the media, so they did no such pouting about missing the playoffs and just prepared for their bowl game, where boy howdy, people were really looking forward to see how all these whining SEC teams would look in their bowl games. And to start off, well, they only went 50% in the opening week of the college football playoff, with Texas hanging on to beat Clemson in a deceptively unclose final score of 38-24. But then their 4th team to make it in, Tennessee, got absolutely gobsmacked by Ohio State in a deceptively close 42-17 game. Yeah, you heard me. That was deceptively close. And then it started happening. The on-the-cusp SEC teams began falling. First, it was Oklahoma with a 1-point loss to Navy in their bowl game. Then Texas A&M had a 4-point loss to USC before their bell cow of Alabama suffered an embarrassing 6-point loss to Michigan. This was like D-Day mixed with Pearl Harbor for SEC homers, and now it was South Carolina's time to take on Illinois with all this pressure, and it starts off like a perfectly crafted Shane Beamer nightmare scenario. From play number 1, South Carolina shifts a full 5 guys on their kickoff unit and proceeded to drop kick the ball to throw off the Fighting Illini as Beamer ball was in full swing. And during that play, there was already a flag as ref ball was in full go. A few plays later, and Illinois was forced to punt, and during that, one of their players leveled the returner, but it was determined that he was blocked into the player. But it's just more fuel to the frustration fire. The Gamecocks would put together a solid field goal drive before another ticky-tack pass interference against the Gamecocks set up the Illini to be at 1st and goal. But the frustrations would go both ways, because as they attempted to drive it in, the ball gets allegedly jarred free, and the fact that there's no good camera angle to prove it, and if anything, nobody really in the announcing booth believed that it was a fumble, gave South Carolina the ball back, as it seemed like bad calls were just going back and forth between the teams and making sure that both coaches were fired up and on edge. It was also getting to the announcing crew, as with still 5 minutes left in the first quarter, when they got called on a delay of game against the Gamecocks for allegedly using disconcerting signals. People were starting to get really frustrated. A few plays later, a shift by a defensive lineman caused the offensive line to jump as the flags just kept pouring in, and even players were starting to get chippy with each other. Even on a play with no flags, Shane was absolutely fuming at the refs, and we've yet to leave the first quarter of this game, but the quarter ends with a frustrating, long and painful Big Ten West style 11-play 66-yard drive, with the tension between teams and players rising until South Carolina's answering drive. We got the first of a new theme. South Carolina on 1st and 10 had to do a late substitution, and Illinois, seeing the play clock winding down, decided to substitute rather slowly, forcing the Gamecocks to blow a timeout, further infuriating Shane Beamer still less than halfway into this game. Even further exacerbated by a 4th down muddle huddle fake field goal attempt as Kai throws the ball maybe a hair short as the pass gets broken up, meaning that long and arduous drive down the field resulted in South Carolina still being down 4 points. Even after forcing the Illinois punt, they drive the long length of the field to end the half in field goal range with a field goal that was missed. It was a frustrating, referee-heavy first half where the score still said 3-7, but we still have the heated half left. Immediately, Illinois opens up the half with an onside kick, just antagonizing the Gamecocks even though they didn't get the ball back, but the defense tightened up to justify the decision with a big 3-and-out, being forced to punt it back. And then, despite still having slower substitutions, the Gamecocks finally find the end zone and regain the lead. But unfortunately, the only thing worse than not having the lead is having it and then losing it. So they pick off the Illini, fumble it back, and 9 frustrating plays later, and the lead was once again gone, which is especially salty against a death by paper cup types offense that Illinois was running. But in an attempt to swing the momentum back in his favor, Shane Beamer did the unthinkable. You see, there's an arm movement that players do where they plan on not returning it or let the ball go over their head, where they simply hold their arms out, signaling to their own team that they don't intend on returning it, so don't injure yourself by blocking. But Shane used it as a ruse. The ball was thrown back to Harbor and he picked up 25 yards. Now, some would say that this play was executed in poor taste, using a fake signal that's only used to keep players healthy to disguise a fake return is something that's dubious at best and amoral at worst, and you can guess which side Brett Bielema was on in this debate. So after he gets his one back by forcing a delay of game with a slow substitution, the play after, a couple plays further in, and one of his players goes down near the opposing sideline, and he took this opportunity to let out some of that frustration he was feeling. As he checks on his guy, he walks away, staring down Shane Beamer and holding out his arms to mock him. And this moment is when all the frustration that from the entire season for Shane was finally let out as he snaps, because while Brett later cleared up that he was referring to the trick play from a couple minutes earlier, it also looked a lot like a substitution signal. The signal that had been plaguing Shane all game, and even 2 plays after that, at the 1-yard line, the Gamecocks tried to substitute late once again, but the Illini sideline slowly but surely trots on a new crop of defensive linemen to force the Gamecocks to use another timeout. As we cut to both head coaches, Shane is fuming, Brett is laughing, and the pettiness meter is at an all-time high. This 14-10 Cheez-Its Bowl had the stadium rocking. Fans were ready to fight each other. And a few plays later, and now Illinois' shift causes USC to jump, but that wouldn't stop them from scoring for long. But things were just absolutely popping off, as 12 plays after that, Illinois finds the end zone after a long 7-minute drive, where now, on South Carolina's final drive, they take it. People are salty, and on 4th and 4, the game on the line, Lenora Sellers drops back, finds his receiver wide open, but ends up instead ending the saltiest bowl game, maybe of all time.
Complete in the end zone, and Illinois takes over on downs.